Dog breath isn't just a dog thing, it's a sign that something inside is already out of balance. If you've been dealing with bad breath, itching, or gut issues, and you have tried things that haven't worked, this episode is going to reframe where you've been looking. I'm Em, a dog mom, former vet tech, dog trainer, and canine nutritionist, and this podcast is for pet parents who love their dogs deeply but still feel like nothing is fully clicking when it comes to what's actually going on inside their dog's body. Today, I'm talking with Kendall, one of the co-founders of Kingdom. And today, we're talking about what's actually driving the things you're seeing on the surface, the itching, the bad breath, the coat that just doesn't look right, and why treating the surface keeps letting you down. Kendall, you came into the pet health area from a really unexpected direction. Can you walk me through what was actually going on with your own life that sent you down this path?
It's kind of a circuitous journey, but basically things started because I was having digestive issues and I've had autoimmune food allergies ever since I was a kid, but I had a particularly acute set of digestive issues about 10, 15 years ago. And I saw all these different doctors. No one could really figure out what was going on. They essentially just said, these are symptoms that you'll just need to manage and deal with for the rest of your life. So I started doing a ton of research on the subject. And at the time, 15 years ago, the microbiome was very much a fringe topic. No one really knew about it. And I came across literature that suggested it's actually the microbes in your gut that not only impact your digestive health, but also help impact your immune system, your brain, and your cognitive functioning. And it all made a lot of sense to me as I was reading it. And I thought, is it possible that my digestive issues and these food allergies and autoimmune issues are actually all related to some kind of dysfunctional interface between the microbes in my gut and my immune system? So I tried a variety of different things. I tried different diets. I tried pharmaceutical drugs. I tried probiotics. Nothing really worked until I started adding fermented foods to my diet. And so I ate sauerkraut every day for a few months. I still don't know exactly what it was. This was an N of one study with no control group, but my digestive issues totally went away. And I just thought, this is incredible that nobody really said anything about fermented foods and the beneficial microbes that are in these things and all of the positive compounds and metabolites that they produce during fermentation. And so after my last startup was acquired, I was based in New York at the time. I went back to Columbia just because I was already in New York, started taking all the coursework in molecular microbiology, the math and statistics for machine learning. And then I worked in a microbiome lab for a number of years, which is where I ended up meeting my co-founder. And at the time, I didn't have any objective other than trying to learn as much as I could about the gut microbiome, trusting that if I went and I learned as much as I could beyond the few articles that I had read that had suggested maybe I should try fermented foods, that a good idea would come as far as starting a new business, because it felt like this is where I wanted to spend the rest of my time. And it just felt like such a white space opportunity because nobody had told me anything about fermented foods and they totally ameliorated my digestive symptoms. So my co-founder and I, we did a lot of research together at Columbia. And then in 2019, we co-founded Kingdom. And the premise was to harness all of these beneficial microbes that are in foods, that are in these environmental sources, and then put them together to address unmet health needs. When we started the business, we went out and we talked with hundreds of CPG companies. And we said, here's what we're doing at Kingdom. We want to build a big biobank of all of these natural strains. We look at the big ingredient companies of the 20th century, and they're mostly chemical businesses. They have these big libraries of all of these artificial chemicals that they'll put together to affect flavor and texture and preserve foods or deliver different functional benefits. And we thought, based on the history of fermentation, where you see these really novel flavors and textures, the ability to preserve foods and even deliver functional health benefits all through natural microbes and fermentation. When we looked at that history, we thought there's a way now to rationally harness these microbes that up until now, as a species, we've kind of done this spontaneously, where we'll take cabbage, we'll leave it out, and we'll put some salt in it, and then the right microbes will come and colonize and turn it into sauerkraut. Similarly, if you want to make kimchi or other fermented foods. And so we thought, well, we can try to bring some science to this and help to identify the beneficial microbes, understand who they are, exactly what they're doing, and then use them in an intentional way to deliver these different benefits. And what we found through those conversations was that there was a really big unmet need in the pet space. Most ingredient companies were making ingredients for humans or for production animals and livestock, and nobody was really making functional ingredients for pets from the ground up, which was crazy to us because people spend all kinds of money on their pets. People consider them to be a part of their family, and yet the brands had not fully caught up in terms of efficacious products. And in large part, that was because there weren't great ingredients to use. So as a brand, you end up really just using what's available to you. So we saw a really big opportunity to build an ingredients company from the ground up for pets and to deliver these ingredients that actually have clinically proven functional benefits for pets and that were designed from them from the beginning.
You and I are kindred spirits in that way where we see a problem and then we're like, how can I fix this? Let me do all of this studying and research and then just do whatever I need to do to put the pieces together to make it better for dogs. I love that you took something that started with a personal problem for you and turned it into something that can help other people. Let's talk a little bit about some of the things that people don't necessarily think about when it comes to gut health. And one of those things is pet parents are not thinking about their pet's mouth. Let's talk about what we're actually seeing with some of the problems when it comes to the mouth and why that is.
It's a great point because when a person or a dog eats something, it comes in through the mouth and then it goes into the digestive system. And there are a few implications of that. One is most of our immune system, and dogs are similar, is actually located in the gut. And the reason for that is that our mouth is the single biggest opening into our bodies. And so, from an immune system perspective, we need to be most concerned about pathogens or unwanted microbes getting into our bodies through our mouth. So, most of the immune system sits in the gut. And another implication of this is that in the mouth, actually, most oral health, especially poor health, is driven by these unwanted microbes that colonize in the dog's mouths. And they create these biofilms along with food and saliva that then coat the teeth. That's where they live and they take up residence. And then every time a dog eats, they interact with that food and they create all kinds of negative compounds that then the dog ends up swallowing. If you have these unwanted microbes colonizing in a dog's mouth, they are both interacting with food and teeth and gums in a negative way. But secondly, every time a dog swallows, some of these unwanted microbes, many of whom are similar to pathogenic microbes from a DNA perspective, they end up moving down into the dog's body and potentially having very negative effects as a result of that. So we really don't want them colonizing in the dog's mouth. And this isn't to say, of course, that all microbes are bad. There's an incredible amount of microbial diversity, and there are many, many beneficial microbes. But there are also these, quote, unwanted microbes, especially in dogs' mouths, that are kind of doing two things. One is they're making volatile sulfur compounds, which cause bad breath. And the second thing is they're interacting with food particles and saliva and creating these sticky biofilms that eventually harden into plaque and tartar. And so, if you want to address oral health at its root, you've really got to go after these unwanted microbes. And that means both breaking up the biofilms where they tend to reside and then also suppressing these unwanted microbes in their growth.
Basically, what you're saying then is that if we were to eliminate some of the items in our dog's food, that this would be less of a problem.
Potentially, we haven't looked at it from a food perspective. What I do think is that there's a way to be much more targeted in going after these unwanted microbes in dogs' mouths. Really, the only things that are shown to be beneficial for oral health in dogs is one is a bunch of oils and herbs which kind of mask the problem and cover it up, like mint and parsley. You also have chemical actives, things like sodium hexametaphosphate. These things are broadly toxic to a variety of different microbes. So, yes, you may kill off the unwanted ones, but you're also killing off the beneficial ones, which you actually need in order to have a healthy ecosystem in the dog's mouth. And so, it's kind of like if you think about it as a forest, an ecosystem of the forest. If you want to get rid of some of the stuff that you don't want in the forest, you shouldn't go and just raise the whole forest and burn the whole thing down. Because what might end up happening is if you burn everything down, the stuff you don't want is actually the stuff that grows back the quickest. And so these toxic chemicals that kill off everything and have broad antimicrobial capabilities, they're really not great. Like we should be thinking about this in a more targeted way. And then the third thing is mechanical action. And so you can get chews that a dog will chew on, and those kind of do help in the sense of like breaking up biofilms and tartar. But they also are really only working at a superficial level and they're not addressing the root issue. And so what we've done from a root cause standpoint is tried to understand what are these unwanted microbes that are doing these things and how can we go after them in a targeted way so that we suppress their growth but we allow the rest of this ecosystem to continue to flourish like in a forest. We want to, in a targeted way, go after the stuff we don't want instead of just burning the whole thing down.
I really like that because if you think about how nutrition works as a whole, whether for people or for dogs, the forest metaphor is great because a lot of pet parents, what they do is they just go, this isn't working. And then they just throw the whole diet out and they start completely over. A lot of parents struggle with not knowing where to start or not knowing how to find those foundational items and then just saying, oh, this is too hard and giving up because there really isn't a lot of information out there on how to do that. What would be some foundational items that you would recommend that people start with?
There's a phrase that dog parents are very aware of called doggy breath. But doggy breath doesn't have to actually be a thing. If humans have bad breath, we say that's a problem. Somebody's got to go take care of that. Like it shouldn't smell that way. So we get mouthwash, we brush our teeth. The problem with dogs is that they really don't like having their teeth brushed. And that's what makes oral health for them so challenging. They don't like stuff in their mouth. And you can't use the same toothpastes that humans use on dogs because they contain chemicals which actually are extremely toxic to dogs. I guess where I'm going with all of this is that there is some utility in mechanical action. If you have chew or something like that, that it is good for dogs to be able to chew on that and to break things up. But you also need something that is actually scientifically shown to go after these unwanted microbes directly. In the Kingdom, we developed this ingredient, Superculture Pet Oral. In the span of just 7 days, it's been shown to reduce these unwanted microbes and also reduce bad breath as well.
When you started looking at what was actually happening in dogs' mouths and guts, what do you think surprised you the most about what nobody was actually talking about?
There's a lot of people talking about how to address these problems at a surface level. If we move from oral health for just a second to immune health, and speaking from my own experience with my immune and digestive issues, the gut is so related to all these different challenges. It interfaces directly with the immune system. And what often happens is you have these pathologies which are actually rooted in the gut and some kind of dysfunctional situation that's going on there, but it manifests on the skin. And so for dogs, for instance, itching is a big problem. It's the number one reason that dogs are taken to the vet every year. And it's been that way for like 11 plus years running. But itching isn't only a surface level issue. It's not relegated just to what's happening on the skin and the coat. It's actually driven by biology within the dog. And so what we found at Kingdom is that there's a beneficial class of compounds called indoles, which are these natural anti-inflammatory compounds that dogs produce when they digest their food. And a healthy dog produces a whole bunch of them. Presumably, an itchy dog is not producing enough of them. We designed an ingredient. And what we found was that it drove a statistically significant reduction in itching as early as 14 days, but sustained through the whole 28-day study. There was nothing going on the skin. This was an ingredient that was delivering these natural compounds that should be produced in the gut. And what we found was that by delivering this ingredient, that itching and other surface level manifestations like skin and coat glossiness also improved. So these are things that might look like surface level issues of the shininess of the coat or itching, but it's actually everything that's going on inside the dog that's causing them on the skin.
People don't think about the fact that if you're healthy on the inside, you're going to be healthy on the outside. Skin condition, coat condition, ear infections, all of that stuff is manifestations from the gut health. And that's something that people don't talk about enough. So I love that you brought that up. On top of that, there are hundreds of supplements out there for dogs. Can you explain the difference between something that's been built for dogs versus something that's been repurposed for them?
This was something that drove us at Kingdom into the pet space, as we realized that all of the ingredients, for the most part, that were being sold to dog and cat brands were ingredients that were actually made originally for humans or for production animals and livestock like horses and cows. The truth is that the biology of dogs and cats is pretty distinct from all of those other species. So it doesn't really make sense that if something is made for a human, that it will necessarily work in dogs. Just as we talked about for toothpaste, there are chemicals like xylitol, which are great in human toothpaste, but are extremely toxic to a dog. So you can't just reuse the same stuff that works for a human or for livestock in a dog and a cat and expect it to work as well. We built from the ground up for dogs and cats. What does that mean? For oral health, we went and we swabbed all of these dogs' mouths and we were looking for the unwanted microbes that were causing bad breath, causing biofilms and plaque, and causing periodontal disease. And when we found them, Then we grew them up, and then we screened through our biobank to find natural microbes, which would get rid of them in a natural way. From the very beginning of designing our oral health ingredient, we were looking at what are these unwanted microbes in dogs' mouths that we want to get rid of, and how do we identify and design an ingredient that'll do that in an effective way. Ultimately, though, the proof is in the pudding. And so it doesn't matter if you've designed all of this from the ground up for dog and cat if it doesn't work. And if it doesn't work better than the stuff that wasn't designed for a dog and a cat. And so that's where we were really excited when we went and we actually ran clinical trials. We've now run, I think, over 11 clinical trials across our two ingredients, and we've got industry leading results across both of them. That's where this notion of creating something from the ground up for dogs and cats matters, is presumably you should see it in efficacy results, and we have in the work that we've done.
That's incredible. Before we wrap up, I want to pause for something I call answering the ask. It's a moment where we shift out of the information and into something a little quieter. Because a lot of the time, the hardest part isn't knowing what to do, it's realizing what you've been missing. Can you walk me through a moment where a dog's health shifted, not because someone added more, but because they finally understood what was actually going on underneath?
To our dog Rio, and this is kind of a funny story, but we live in Brooklyn, and so we take him on walks in the park a lot. And one day we had him at home, and he was behaving really weirdly, like he was wobbling, he couldn't really stand up. We didn't know what was going on. And we were Googling, we were talking to different AI tools about his symptoms and asking what was happening. And it suggested either he may have swallowed something at the park, like marijuana, for instance, is shown to have these kinds of side effects on a dog, or maybe he had some kind of severe spinal issue. And so we were really scared because we were like, we don't think it's the former. We take him on walks, but if it's the latter, that's really bad. And so we took him to the vet. They weren't able to figure out what was going on. They sent us to a specialist. And the next day, his symptoms still hadn't got better. So we took him to the specialist. But then, as we were sitting with the specialist and waiting for these tests to come back, then whatever it was that was in his system that he'd eaten at the park, fully passed through, and he started behaving completely normally. I was relieved because he wasn't having these issues anymore. But there was something in his diet that shouldn't have been in his diet, but it was gone. And then he healed. And we were thrilled because we thought it was potentially like a life threatening thing for our dog.
It is scary. Marijuana is one of those things that dogs get a hold of, and it either affects them very badly or it doesn't affect them at all. So it's interesting to see the run of effects on it. And I'm glad that he recovered just fine and that it wasn't anything major or prolonged that you had to deal with. If a dog parent is listening to this and they've been dealing with bad breath, itching, gut issues, and they've tried all of the things and they haven't worked, what would you want them to sit with after this conversation?
Really, the most important thing in my mind is the product needs to address the issue at its root, and it needs to have clinical substantiation demonstrating that it can actually fulfill the marketing claims that it makes. I urge pet parents to look for that from the brands that they're buying from.
That is excellent advice. Can you tell everyone how they can connect with you?
Sure. We have a website, kingdomsuperculture.com. My name is Kendall, and you can email me directly. I'm Kendall at kingdomsuperculture.com, or you can just reach out to us through the website.
Kendall said something in this conversation that I keep coming back to. He said the problem isn't that you haven't tried enough. It's that most of what's out there is designed to mask what you're seeing, not address what's causing it. The itching, the bad breath, the coat that's dull and shedding. Those aren't separate problems. They're the same conversation happening in different places on your dog's body. You've been paying attention. You've been trying. That part isn't wrong. Sometimes what shifts isn't doing more, it's understanding where to look. If this episode made you realize how hard it is to know what's actually helping your dog, I do have nutrition support and resources that walk you through how I started looking at these patterns differently with Toby and Fitz, without throwing everything out and starting over every time something changes. You can find the link in the episode description. So be kind, spread joy, and remember, what your dog is showing you on the outside is almost always about what's happening on the inside.